All right. Hello and welcome everyone to Runners Roundtable. Today we are joined by Coach Kristin Stokes, and I am so glad to have you here because I just love your Instagram page and how one, you're having fun with running right now. And I think that might have to do with the phase of life you're in at the moment. So before I say anything else about what that particular phase of life is, how about you tell us about yourself and your running story?
Sure. So I am the person that hated running growing up. I played every contact sport imaginable, went to play soccer in college. I cried when the coach would be like, okay, we're going to do the beep test today, or we have to do a mile under this time, or we're just going to do a ton of running today. I despised running. And it's funny to everyone now that now I have turned into a marathoner and I'm pretty much addicted to it at this point. I think I'm at 18. I've done ultra marathons, but it's possible to go from hating it to being like your true passion and calling in life. I think I got into it, I'm going to say like the year after college. And the reason behind it was I was diagnosed with MS my senior year of college. And I kind of just like definitely fell into a place where I was like, oh my God, my life's over. I'm not going to be able to really do anything. Cause back in the day, I guess it was because it's almost like 10 years now, they kind of like didn't give you a good outlook on life. They kind of were just like, there's no cure. You're gonna have to modify how you live. But then I got in touch with like a really good neurologist who had a completely different outlook on life. And he's like, you've always been active. Let's find you something to do. And we just started with 5Ks and it kind of like slowly and surely escalated all the way into the full marathon.
That's amazing. And I feel like it's such a common story for a lot of people. And I think back to myself as well, where, in elementary school and middle school, in high school, I actually did everything I could to get out of PE because I didn't want to run. I didn't want to do the mile like that. I don't know how schools are teaching this, but it's definitely not in a way that's really inviting for kids to like enjoy it. So I'm very similar that when I look back at myself growing up, I'm amazed that I even started to run because for me, running was not an enjoyable thing.
And it's viewed as a punishment, right? Like I loved sports, I loved working out, but then the running aspect of it was always a punishment. So I feel like it just like put this bad negative thing around running. So it's like, I don't want to run. That's the worst part of my sport. When in reality, it's like it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I mean, think of all the kids. We see it I see it on TV too, and where it's like, oh, you messed up in practice, go run 2 laps. You did this, go do
Exactly.
those laps, and it's like, come on now, the sport is so good. Let's not use that as a punishment. So, how did you get into coaching?
So I got into coaching because, like I said, I played soccer in college. I wanted to coach soccer, but that just isn't feasible with my work schedule. I have a full-time job and I can't get out, early to coach that. But I said, I want to give back to the sport in some way. So someone had told me about the RRCA running course. And I said, okay, I'm going to at least take it because I said, I feel like I have the experience now, but I need to know, the mechanics. I want to educate myself because I'm really big on, you see on social media a lot, you have these people giving out tips or telling people what to do, but have no real certifications or education on it. So I was like, I don't want to be one of those people. So let's get some courses going here. Did that and then kind of felt more confident. Okay, I have the experience and now I have the education and started coaching.
Yeah, social media is definitely an interesting thing because I feel like a lot of people will take someone who seems like they've been running for a while, or I've also seen people who maybe they're just really fast runners, naturally are fast runners, and people will automatically think they're experts. And I, even for myself, I'll read some of these posts and I'm like, oh, can't you just add a little like asterisk with a disclaimer that says this is based on my personal experience?
Yes.
It's rough, and that's where, and I'm sure for you it's kind of similar, right? When we came into running, if we're talking about 10 years ago, social media wasn't what it was
It was
back
nothing.
then, right? Like everyone now is an instant expert, and I feel that sometimes people, how do I say this, either you get caught up in the wrong information that is then going to, if not lead you to injury, lead you to burnout within the sport.
I 100% agree. And it's the comparison trap, right? Because people just don't know better. Or like you said, they're just assuming like, okay, this is a really fast runner. They must know what they're talking about. Or they've been doing this for 20 years. So they know what they're talking about. And then it gets into this comparison trap. And as you learn as a coach, it's not a one size fits all for every runner. There's not one training plan that works for every runner. You have to be very flexible. And it's
Yeah.
a one-on-one experience.
Yeah. And that is something, that's why I was so interested in having these conversations with different coaches, because everyone has such a different approach to it. But one of the themes throughout all these conversations is that it is a one-to-one relationship and a one-to-one experience. And I said this, and everyone's going to hear this so much as these conversations go on, where it's like, no, your coach is more than just the training plan that you're given. Your coach is a huge support system. So can you tell us a little bit about your coaching style and your coaching philosophy?
Sure. So I know when I first started running, I just went online, looked at the training plan, did Hal Higdon, Hansen method. It worked for a while, but then I think you get to a certain point in your running where if you want to hit a certain goal, you're going to need, number one, the accountability. And then number two, like you just need someone there that's going to motivate you and make sure you're doing the right thing. Because I know when I was training myself, I was running every day, running absurd mileage, never taking rest days. Once I got a coach, it was like someone was constantly telling you, like, you need to take rest days, you need to include strength training. So you had someone keeping you accountable on that side. So for my coaching philosophy, like we said, one-on-one, actually meeting the runner that wants to work with you ahead of time. Like you just don't agree to work with someone, right? You need to actually have like a meeting with them and see if your personalities match, because there's going to be times where maybe that just isn't a good fit for you or the runner. So you want to meet with them, get to know them, make sure it's going to be a good fit, and then kind of get to know, like you want to interview them, know how they work. Some people do really well with, a harder approach. Other people want you to, be a little bit easier. So I see a coach is keeping someone accountable, and they're also like a mentor, and you're also just, I don't know, I'm friends with lots of my athletes too, because you need to be there for them.
Yeah. And that's something as well that weaved into everything that you're saying, right? Your coach is sometimes the person who is supporting you in a goal where no one else in your life may be supporting you in that goal. So
Exactly.
you're playing a very, very big role. So when you do these interviews with them, is that like a phone call interview? Do you have some kind of, Google form where you're asking them questions? How do you determine that someone is a good fit for you and that you're a good fit for them?
Yeah, so I work through True Potential Running. And essentially what it is, if someone's interested in working with me, we send them out a questionnaire that kind of goes over, their running history, their injury experience, which is a huge part of it, and just kind of see like what their goals are. Is it more like a life goal? Are they training for a specific race? Is it a PR? Just kind of getting to know like what they're actually looking for in a coach. Then once the questionnaire is filled out, then we have a one-on-one Zoom call, kind of like this. We kind of just go through and talk to each other and see what we're trying to each get out of the experience.
Have you ever met with people who you're like, nope, this is not a good fit?
I mean, it happens. I'm always willing to try, right? I'm never going to turn someone away, but it has happened where you get some runners that, like, my big thing is, I think it's just how I was brought up and how I was raised. You have to show up and you have to put the effort in. I can only lead you so far. And if you're not going to put the work in, then I can't help you, essentially. Like I can motivate you to get there. And I know it's not going to be, you may not show up every day, but I need you to put the effort in. So there's been times where maybe we've started coaching with someone, and then every once in a while, it's just like, they're not doing their workouts, but yet they want to know why they're not improving. So I would say it's never like I've turned anyone away. I've always tried, but then every once in a while, I look at that, it just doesn't work in the end because they aren't showing up.
How do you have that conversation with the athlete? That's such a hard one. That's
such a hard one.
Yeah, that's my curiosity too. I'm like, oh man, when it's going well, it's going well. But sometimes you have to have that conversation. And how does that work for you? Or how do you approach that?
So I think it comes down to like a few things. You have to know the personality of your athlete. I know, like, I'm trying to think of myself, like personally, I do great with tough love. Like, give it to me straight. I do not like being coddled. If I'm not doing something, tell me. Like that's how I like it. But I know there's a lot of people that are the exact opposite way, where it's like, I don't need that tough love. I need you to support me and let's figure out what's going on. So I'd say in some cases where it's happened, the first thing is, hey, do you want to get on the call? Want to get on a call and just talk? Let's talk it through. Because maybe something's going on in their life where it's just like not a good time. So maybe it's not something that, is that they're not showing up. We just need to reassess, the training plan, because maybe they just can't fit it into their lifestyle right now. Or maybe, they thought they could run X amount of miles a week and maybe we need to scale it back and retune it. Usually that works. We just need to have a conversation. If they're not even willing to get on a phone call, or it just seems to be like you're getting a lot of excuses, that at that point, that's usually when you have to have that tough conversation, say, is this what you want? And if not, then like maybe we should take a step back. But then always say, like, I'm here for you if you want to come back. You want to leave it open.
Yeah. Do you do your coaching? Is it like monthly, weekly? How does that work?
So I build out my plans per month, but I don't make them visible to the athletes until the week of, because I just have this theory that, especially for marathon training, right? If I release a whole month's worth of training, my athlete's going to be looking at something from 4 weeks from now, when I just want them focusing on the task at hand. So I personally have them ready to go in the background, but don't make them visible to the week of.
Yeah, I love that, because and that also depends on the athlete, because some athletes may want that entire, like, to see the month out so that they know what they're building towards. Me, I've gotten to the point in my running where I'm like, just tell me what I need to do today and we're good. I don't want to think about it, because I already have a tendency to overthink.
Exactly.
Workouts, right? If you just tell me, go run 5 miles and like have fun with it, no problem. But if I see that it's a workout, like, even if it's like today's workout it had strides, and even something like that, I'm like, how am I going to feel today? Is it going to be okay? So I'm like, no, I need less information so that I can be present. But I also want to go back to something you brought up, because I feel people, particularly with the bigger distances, and I'm thinking more of marathon training, people don't take the time, not all people, but I would say a good chunk of people really don't take the time to sit back and reflect on whether the lifestyle can accommodate marathon training. And I say that as someone, the half marathon is my favorite distance. And that's one that I'm like, okay, I can reasonably fit that into my lifestyle without it causing too much ripple into life off the run. But marathon training, for me, in my experience, marathon training feels like a part-time job. And I say that because it takes up a lot of time.
It is.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of time. And I am so aware of everything around the runs. So like, Friday nights, I'm in bed by 8:30 or 9 at the latest when I'm marathon training. Like, I'm like, sorry, fam, like, everyone, my kids, thankfully, they're older now, so they actually appreciate it, because they're like, oh, we get to stay up past mommy. Like, there's something very exciting about that. But I like that you brought that part up, because I think it's really important to highlight that this training has to fit within your lifestyle, one. And two, you have to be willing to make sacrifices to that lifestyle if that goal is truly important to you. Do you have that conversation with athletes when they approach you and they're like, oh, I want to do a marathon?
Definitely, because I think, and it even is like different for what your goal is for a marathon, right? Because if someone tells me, like, I just want to train for a marathon to finish, and that's all I'm doing, I just want to have fun with it. That's even different than someone who's like, I need the PR for the marathon, because I feel like, I know personally, if I'm just doing a marathon, for fun, who runs 26 miles for fun, but if you're just doing it for fun, like, how I train and take the life around the training is much more different. That if it's like, no, this is my PR marathon, because it's like you're dialed in and that's all you're doing. So it's definitely different. You need to have that conversation. So is this for fun? Are you just doing it to, finish, have a good time? If that's the case, then okay, maybe it's not as all the way in. And then if you're doing it for a PR, like, okay, do you have the time to commit to this? You're probably gonna have to get up early. You're probably gonna have to modify things around the weekend and miss out on social events, or you're gonna have to like leave them early. So just all things to consider when we have those conversations.
What do you do when an athlete, so say I'm an athlete and I'm like, okay, hey, Kristin, like, I want to do this marathon for fun. I just like want to cruise through it. And let's say that, 5 to 6 weeks into training, I'm like, oh, training is actually like, it feels good. It's going good. And I tell you, okay, now I want to go for a PR. How
You
does
can
that,
modify,
what's,
you modify
okay.
then, because right, because as a coach you have to be flexible. You shouldn't be a coach that's just putting out a 3-month marathon training plan, that's it, because things happen. Because in the case where you're just saying like maybe they want to go for the PR now, it's easily fixable. Now you add some speed training in, now you maybe have long runs with speed training in, so you can just modify accordingly. And same thing if someone was like, this just really isn't working for me, let's adjust. Or God forbid they get injured, like you're gonna have to modify, and usually to do on the fly. I will say as one thing that I try to make very clear to my athletes when they're working for me, I get we have lives outside of running. So just text me, call me if you need something changed. I'm very flexible.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to this idea that this coaching relationship is a relationship that requires communication and also some honesty from your athlete when they are communicating with you as to like, how are the workouts going? What's going on? What's happening? And I think, and I don't know if this is, I'm curious to see in your experience with your athletes, how does the communication change depending on where they are in the training cycle, or if they're maybe in just like a base building kind of in between races cycle? How does that communication shift, change, or does it even change?
I honestly think it depends on the athlete themselves, because some athletes really like that one-on-one contact constantly. And I do too, because it's like then everyone's aware of what's going on and it just builds a really good relationship. And as a coach, I can almost like tell when something's off because maybe they aren't contacting me as much or something like that. So I really like when, it's the constant feedback back and forth. But I will say, right before the races, it always picks up. You get tons of questions, or maybe you just need to like be there for them because they're nervous. So I would say like right before the race, I always make sure we have like a pre-race call. They have my cell phone number if they need to text me something. I try to check in right before the race, after the race, and then I always try to, if I'm tracking them, send them something like where they're getting to that hard part of the race, like that they got this. So I would say communication always picks up. I'd say like in the beginning, at the end of the training, and then I check in with my athletes, I'd say pretty much every day. Like the feature that I use is Training Peaks. And I just go in there, we go back and forth and comment. And then, they all have my numbers. So if something urgent pops up, they can text me as well.
Right. I love that. And I think, again, it's the coaching relationship is not just a training plan, right?
No, no.
There's so much more to it. I'm curious to know, what is your favorite part about being a coach?
Seeing my athlete succeed. There is no better feeling than an athlete that has worked so hard all year, and then it comes to race day and they cross that finish line, and it doesn't even have to be a PR. They maybe just finish the race strong, or they just had like a really good day. There's no better feeling than that, because you help them achieve the goal that they're working so hard for, and just to see that smile and see them finish, like there's no better feeling than that.
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm just thinking of finish lines, right? So like there's such beautiful experiences, and to know that you have a coach there that's supporting you along the way definitely helps move you through the race. Have you had any athletes, and I'm asking this purely as a selfish question, of who have been disappointed with their races, and what does that dialogue between coach and athlete look like?
Yeah, we definitely have them, because you know what? You can train so hard. And I've had this happen to me. And you think it's going to be a great race, and just something goes wrong. Like maybe your fueling wasn't great that day, or maybe the weather wasn't great. So it happens. Typically, if I know they were going for a PR and it looks like they didn't go well or didn't go according to plan, I will usually send them a text, just tell them like, you finished. It's not like you stopped. Kind of just like tell them, you still did something amazing here. Like, don't let this one result take away from that. And then I give them breathing room, right? Because I know how I am. If I don't achieve a goal, I don't want to talk to anyone. I need a solid day to either like feel my feelings, or just like emotionally just like be bitter and upset and frustrated by myself. And then I usually check in a day or two later and say, like, do you want to get on a call and just like talk through what happens, and we can rebuild for next time? But again, it's about the personality of the athletes. Some athletes just want to dive right in and be like, let's like critique this right now and figure out what went wrong. And others are like, no, I need a whole week to think about. So it's just really knowing your athletes and letting them know that you are there for them when they're ready.
Yeah, that's such a tough one too. And I think again, I'm like, I asked that for purely selfish reasons because I've had to have those conversations. And there are definitely certain races that sting a little bit more. And I find that in those experiences where the race has stung, my coach has been so instrumental in kind of snapping me out of that, of like reminding me, like what you said, where it's like, you still did something amazing. You still crossed the finish line. And I think that's another tool in the coach's toolkit, right? Of saying, hey, okay, we can process this when you're ready. But right now, I want you to remember that you still got from start line to finish line. Like there's still
And
a
grew
lot
so
of
much in
decisions.
between, right?
Yeah, and it is, especially when we're talking about these longer distances, you know, when you're thinking about a marathon, you're thinking about hours upon hours of being out there where a lot can happen, a lot can go through your mind, and to get there, to make that journey from start line to finish line, that is an accomplishment in and of itself. But it's sometimes it's really hard to kind of see that, especially when you have spent it's not, and that's the thing where I'm curious if you ever have athletes that say, okay, that race didn't go well. Let's sign up for the next one and get started on the next one. And how do you approach that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So it's one or the other, right? They're either like, I'm done with that distance, never again, or it's okay, I want to sign up for a race next week. So I think it all depends on the distance, number one. You know, if it's shorter distance, okay, fine, we can try again right away. But if it's like something like a half marathon, it's like, okay, this is good. The fire's been lit, but we still have to do a recovery here. I usually will tell them, like, I want you to take a full 2 weeks off because I do not want you to be burned out. And you're not, and I think the big component is telling them you're not going to lose your fitness. Because that is the big misconception is, well, if I don't go right back into training, I'm going to lose my fitness. So he says you have to assure them you're going to be fine. Your body's actually going to benefit from the full 2 weeks off. And then, yeah, let's get right back into it. But you have to tell them though, like, is 2 weeks enough? Like I always ask them, like, we're going to go right back into
Mm.
training. So you let me know if it's enough. And I've had some athletes come back and be like, you know what? No, let's do like one more week. And I've had some athletes 1 week are like, can we start running again? Can we start running again? It's like, just relax, take the 2 full weeks. You'll thank me 10 weeks from now when you're in the middle of training.
How do you convince them though to do that, right? So you have an athlete, let's say it's a newer athlete to coaching and to the structure, because as you said, and I'm the same way, before I had a coach, I was running like year round. And I still look back at the first time I did a marathon. It was like, for people who don't know, I did the Chicago Marathon in the fall of 2014. In January of 2015, I did the Miami Marathon. In March/April of 2015, I did a 50K ultra marathon. And then that fall, I did Berlin, Chicago. So like at that time, I was doing all these races. I look back at that and I'm like, how did I do that? Like, and I think it's just age. I think I benefited greatly from being a younger, newer runner. But now I'm like, I would never do that. Like, I don't think my body can bounce back. I've personally now have learned the importance and the benefits of recovery. So, how do you get an athlete who is totally new to this process of recovery? Because that's really what we're talking about here, is the process of recovery. How do you get an athlete on board with that? Say they had their race and it maybe didn't go as well. And then they're like, okay, no, I need that redemption race right now. I need to feel better, or, whatever the case is. And how do you get them on board with recovering and really buying into that?
So you nailed it. You learn, right? So I can only do so much. I'm not going to put anything in your calendar for 2 weeks. But if you have that runner that is not going to listen to you, there's only so much you can do, right? Because you can't be there holding their hand, telling them not run. I was the same way as you, as a marathon junkie. I think I've done like 4 marathons in a matter of like two months. I just, like you said, I don't know how I did. I got hurt. That was my lesson. Major injury where it's like impacts me still to this day, like where I have to like warm up and do stuff. So Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of runners have to learn the hard way if they're not willing to recover. There's only so much you can do. Another thing to athletes, if you do a run and it uploads to your training app and then you delete it, your coach
Oh.
still sees it. just a fair warning, but your coach still sees it. So if I do happen to see that, I usually will send like a quick message and say like, hey, I see you're running today. I'm warning you, take the recovery. And if I notice they're continuously doing that and not listening, then like when we start building up again, I'm going to start at a lower mileage because I know they've been running. So I kind of like use that. So fair warning, if you think you're fooling anyone, you're not in the apps. It shows the coaches still that you put in a workout in there at some point.
I was going to say, I'm going to assume you probably get like an email notification saying like,
yeah, you get a notification. We'll say like so-and-so ran. And then like 30 seconds later, it's like, this has been deleted, but you still have the audit trail that they ran. So you knew they were doing something.
I love that. I love that because, you know, there's something so special about being a runner and it's that we don't know how to recover. Like we truly don't know how to take it easy. And I think of, you know, like when you have an injury and everyone says it, runners are hilarious because the very first question is, when can I get back to
run? Yeah.
like, so I just find that so funny that like athletes have done that. And it's like, just don't wear, it's like you want the data, but you don't want your coach to see it, right?
Yep.
And like in that case, I'm like, just don't wear a watch, like don't record it, just go out and see what happens. But it's, you know, also runners like the data,
Yep.
like we like to look at the data. So I find that to be really funny. And I just love how you deal with that because it is just so clever, right? Like you're like, okay, well then when you officially start training, we're actually going to start you at a lower mileage, which for a runner can seem like a step back, right? Especially if it's a runner. And again, runners love to look at the data. I've yet to meet someone who doesn't, where it's, and I've done it too, like myself, where I'm like, oh, the last marathon training cycle, what did I do in week 1 and what did I do? Like I like to kind of compare. So an athlete like that, I'm sure they might go back to like, okay, wait, week 1, I was running 25 miles and here after this race, she has me running 20 miles. Like, what's going on there? Do the athletes ever question you on that? Or what feedback do you usually get as a coach?
Yeah, so I would never say I've had an athlete question my training plans or what they're doing that week. Because a big part of the coach athlete relationship is trust. You're putting they're putting their trust in you to get them to their goal at the end, right? So I never had an athlete question me. If anything, I maybe had them question like, why are we just doing one speed workout this week? Or like, hey, I feel like I can handle more. Do you think we can adjust that way? But I've never had them say like, I don't agree with you.
Let's knock on wood and, you
Yes,
know,
yeah,
hope
knock on wood.
let's hope that doesn't come up. But I think that would also lead to a really fruitful conversation in terms of going back to like what you said, where it's okay, you have the next month mapped out for them, but they're only seeing the week. So if they're coming to you and they're saying, hey, I think I can do more mileage, or I want to do another speed workout this week, or blah, 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 you can be like, okay, but remember, this week is setting you up for next week, or it's setting you up for that point where you are doing 2 speed workouts a week, or where the mileage is a little bit higher. And that's something too that I feel like as a coach, you have a more global view that obviously like it changes every time there's a new data entry, every time the person does a run. So it's so funny to me because every time I have these conversations, I'm amazed by how much actually goes into creating the coaching plan, creating a structure for the given athlete. And I'm curious as to where you find your creativity with creating these plans, or how do you keep yourself excited about doing these training plans for the athletes?
Yeah, so I think the most exciting thing is that every plan is different. So, and every runner's goal is different. I have athletes from a 5K to learning to just like be able to run most of the 5K, all the way up to someone who's trying to, get a sub-3 marathon. So it's fun and exciting because everything's a little bit different, right? Um, and I've had to educate myself as well, right? Because I don't consider myself an expert as a short distance runner. So if someone says they want to do like a 5K or 10K, that's fun for me because I get to learn something new because I really am doing a lot of research because I personally despise those distances because I am not a fast short distance runner. So it's fun for me to like educate myself and learn. And that's like the fun part about working with True Potential is we have a group of coaches. So it's really nice. We get to bounce ideas off each other. We actually have a library where if someone really likes a workout that they made, they can put it in there. So then you have kind of resources and tools there where we can say like, oh, it is a really good workout. I should try that out for my athletes. So I'd say like it doesn't get old making training plans because I feel like I like learning. I like developing new plans. So to me, it's fun.
How is that working amongst a group of coaches?
I really like it because it's I like used to work by myself and that was nice, but it's really nice just to be able to bounce off your ideas and meet with other coaches, right? Because everyone has like their own expertise, and to be able to ask someone, just a question or just say like, hey, I have this athlete that wants to do XYZ. Have you had anyone try to do this before? Or do you have any suggestions? I think it's nice because I feel like on our team we all kind of like specialize in something, so it's nice just to kind of like be able to bounce ideas off each other, help each other out. And I think it's just nice working a big team aspect because you get to cheer on a lot more runners because, right, we all have our own athletes, but they're all part of True Potential. So it's nice to see so many different people achieve something.
How did you become a part of True Potential?
Yeah, so I had been following them for a while and I had reached out to the leader, Dana, and she did the same thing like that she would do with any athlete. She interviewed me, asked me like what my goals were as a coach, and she had to see if I was a good fit or not. So yeah, luckily I
Well, how did
was.
you
And
answer? Yeah, how did you answer that question in terms of what your goals as a coach are?
yeah, so I think with when I was working by myself, it was like my first year to being a coach. And I told her that I really wanted to join her team because I thought I could grow personally as a coach. I thought I had more to offer and I wanted to take on more athletes, and this presented an opportunity that way, and I wanted to help more people. So I kind of told her like I see myself growing as a coach, taking on more runners and expanding my profile because I had really only been working with runners in the long distance. So it was a nice to be able to work with different distances and just kind of make me feel more educated in those other distances as well.
Yeah, it's expanding your scope essentially
Yes.
of the type of athletes that you can work with, because it is, right? It's so different, a 5K and a marathon. And for those who are listening and may not know, how would you describe your coaching approach to someone who's doing a 5K and someone who's doing a marathon, assuming that they're both just doing it for time, or not time, but they're both doing it for fun. Like they just want to be able to do that. Because I think with both distances, there are a lot of athletes who just want to see if they can do it. They just want to try it. Maybe it's a bucket list. Maybe it's been something they've been wanting to do for a while. What is the approach with coaching both of those?
Yeah, so they're two different animals. The first difference is the time commitment, right? If you're going to train for a 5K, it's not going to be as big as a time commitment because the highest mileage you're going to get maybe is 5 miles if you really want to get there. So it's not as much time on feet and it's not as much time during the week that you need to dedicate to it. That's the one difference. And it's a lot more short speed work, whereas the marathon is longer speed work. So it's really different in terms of the types of workouts you're having them do. So I think that was hard for me to like grasp as a marathoner, saying like, okay, if you're going to do the 5K, shorter distances, more speed, and then different types of workout. Because, in a marathon, speed workouts may be, a mile repeat, 2 mile repeat. Whereas a 5K, it might be something as short as a 200-meter repeat. So it's like you kind of have to like adjust and make sure you're doing workouts that have the specific purpose for the end goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's like just hearing that and looking forward, because I know, my marathon, I'm doing the London Marathon next year, and training for that will officially start in January. And I'm like, oh, I'm not looking forward to that. I just came off of a training block that was more focused on 5K. And that was just so much fun as someone who is likes the longer distances, but I like longer distances for cruising. Like I'm just like, yeah, I love to run, like not necessarily the physical aspect of running, but there is something very soothing about being outside and moving the body. So to think of going like from those extremes, it's a totally different headspace as well. But I absolutely loved having that little block of 5K because it was that. It was, oh, my speed workouts were just so great. Like, I'm like, I could do this all the time. Whereas when you think about the marathon and you're thinking about mile repeats or doing like longer chunks of speed, more of those tempo workouts, I'm like, okay, I have to get my brain ready for that because they are they're both beasts, but two totally different beasts. And I like that you challenged yourself to learn how to coach that because it's very easy in general, not just with coaching, but in general with life, right? To find like, okay, no, this is my comfort zone and I'm going to stick to that comfort zone. So I really appreciate how you put yourself out there as a coach, but then you also put yourself out there with the distances.
Definitely. And I agree too. Like you just said, you did a 5K training block. I always recommend that for marathoners. Like if they don't know what they want to do next, I always say, like, if you just want to work on your focus on your speed, you should do a 5K training block. My coach had me do that the one time, and I felt like I gained so much speed and confidence in speed workouts that was like the best thing I ever did. And they don't have to be, and they're not long training blocks. So it's like, it really is a good time if you're just really looking to fine tune something, doing a short distance training block. I highly recommend that to all distance runners.
Yeah. And for me, it worked out too because I live in Miami, Florida. So my 5K training block was in the summer. And it was
Smart.
the first time. Yeah, it was the first time. So like even with London upcoming, I'm excited about that because I've never done, at least here in Florida, a training block that happens in winter/spring, or I guess it's technically all winter. So I'm curious about that. But this summer was so great because I've only ever done marathon training in the summer and I grumble and complain. And I am not a pleasant person during marathon training in the summer, which brings me to the question of the mental state of your athletes. How do you work with that? Because running is a hugely it is a mental challenge. Where does the support from you as a coach come from when it comes to addressing or providing any support when it comes to mental development of the athlete?
Yeah, as a coach, like I feel like you're your athlete's biggest cheerleader and advocate. So if they are, if they're bummed about workout, like you need to be there for them and you need to build them back up because you want to give them the confidence that they're capable of doing the task at hand. If an athlete is down about not doing something well in a workout, or maybe they didn't hit the paces, I always tell them, was the effort there? Did it feel hard to you? And if they come back and say, like, yes, the effort was there. It's like, and did you show up? Yes. Then that's what matters. So it's kind of like you have to like, you want to be their motivator. You want them to look at workouts in a way of not just like, I hit this pace, so this is successful, or I didn't hit this pace, so it wasn't successful. You need to help them see the full picture. And I feel like that a lot of time boosts the confidence and motivates them because then they're looking for other factors to show that that workout was successful. And honestly, sometimes you just need to tell them like, this isn't your week. Like you were just saying, maybe it was 100 degrees all week and, 100% humidity. So no one probably did great this week. Just chuck it up as like, this wasn't your week and we keep moving forward. I think that's why I always kind of tell them like, dwell on it for a little bit and we're moving forward. So.
I love that because I'm definitely someone who I'm like, I just want to throw myself a pity party. Like, just give me a few moments to have the pity party. I promise I won't stay here, but let me have my pity party because with running, I feel like there's so many pity parties that happen. And I try to tell people that running is you have your highs, you have your lows, but you have a lot that's just in the middle, like a lot that's really, really ambivalent. Like there's just a lot of that. And I think that when we get used to, or at least I try to tell myself this, right? Like when I have like a string of weeks that feel really, really good, the weeks that feel bad, they feel so crushing. Like I'm like, what am I doing wrong? But what you're bringing up too is the point that it's like, hey, there's life. Like life is happening in the background of all this running. And as a coach, that is part of what you do is you remind them like, hey, life is happening, but it's also that question, which I absolutely love is, okay, was the effort? Like, how was the effort? How did it feel? Because it could have felt like a crappy run, but like you gave it your all. Just like it could feel like an easy run and you felt like you were phoning it in, or you felt like you could have given more, which I feel like you get both of those. So I love that that effort question is there, because sometimes the effort gives you a little more input than the actual times or the heart rate. Not to say that those things are important, but just that it's like, it's a more complex picture than just looking at numbers.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's just, this is also, it's just, to me, running is so fascinating because of that, because where we are dynamic in the experience of running. If you had to describe your coaching philosophy in one sentence, how would you describe it?
Oof. In one sentence.
That's such a good one.
Let's see. Oh, that's hard. In one sentence. I'd say
I
my
know
coaching,
that.
yeah, let's see. I would say my coaching philosophy is you get what you put into it, and that goes for the athlete and the coach. So, and then I would say too, it's a trusting relationship that's constantly evolving, right? It's not something that's just standing there. Like you have to constantly be working at it, and things are going to come up. And you have to be flexible. That's more than one sentence, but that was a hard question.
Yeah. Well, and I think the relationship is a living thing, right? It's not like
Definitely.
when you go online and you get your training plan. And I mean, you said it, like I'm looking at my bookshelf here because that's how I trained for half marathons and full or marathons with the Hanson's marathon method. And I remember I had an Excel sheet. I love Excel sheets. And I would like highlight the ones that I went through.
Yes.
And it was just like that. Like, and I didn't keep notes. Like it was just like, okay, got it done, like got it done. And there's no feedback. There's nothing. I can look back to that time and not really capture the experience of it. But once I started working with a coach, it's like, okay, wait, there's the training platform, where things get put in, and like what you said, where there's comments that go back and forth. So I can go back to certain workouts and be like, oh yeah, this is kind of the dialogue, or this was the experience around that particular run, because it is a living, interactive relationship. And I love how you said it's, you get on both parts, like both of you are a part of the relationship and both of you have responsibility to that relationship as coach and athlete. And again, I just love that because we really don't think about that. We don't think about what this relationship is. I find that people, or I guess in your experience, when people seek out coaching, where are they in their running journey that they've come to that point where they're like, all right, let me get a coach?
I feel like most of the time is experienced runners, because I think they've gotten to a point where maybe they felt like they alone have reached their potential themselves, and they're looking for someone to take them to that next level. But every once in a while, you do get that new athlete that has never ran any distance before, and they want to do a race, or they just want to become healthier, or they just have like a goal to become an avid runner. And but I would say most of the time it's more the experienced runners that maybe tried something, it's not working, so they're willing to reach out some advice and see if someone else can help them get to that goal.
Yeah. How do you, because it's different expectations, right? How do you handle those differing expectations between the runner that is more experienced and the runner that is fairly new or brand new to the sport of running?
So the novice runner, I think, is easier because you essentially can mold them, right? Because they're putting all your trust in you and they don't know any better. So I feel like they're easier sometimes because they don't have bad habits to break. They are coming in with an open mind, I would say, a lot of the time. And I don't want to say it's easier because no matter what, they're going to achieve their goal, but it is easier because I think they just want to become a runner, and that's the fun part of it. Like, it's not as much pressure or high stress. When you have an experienced runner come in, you really have to, like I said, like, that's the valuable part of that questionnaire. You really have to get to know their background. Why are they here? Did they have any injuries in the past? What type of runner are they? How many days are they running? What's their mileage? You kind of just need to build this full picture of them first and then see how you want to attack those goals. Because sometimes they come in, we're like, I need to run 7 days. And it's like, well, that's not going to work. So it's like, you kind of have to like get to know them first and to kind of like peel apart the layers there and see how you can help them. So I would say, like, I love both. And I really love when the experienced runner comes in, they're willing to like relinquish all control and say, like, I'm all in. But I would say it's like 50-50 sometimes. Like, it's very, as you know, as a runner, it's very hard to give control. You think you know best. So sometimes it's hard.
Yeah. Or you think that's something, and I feel like, and it's interesting you bring up the experienced runner, because I consider myself an experienced runner because of how long I've been running, how many different races I've done. And yet I still feel like a brand new runner with a lot of things. And I don't know if that's maybe just having been a runner so long, I am more open to seeing things like a new runner. Or if not, I'm just very nostalgic of, like, I think back to when I was like, I can remember that of being a new runner and everything feeling exciting and everything being like, okay, let's just see. And that's why I did, a marathon, an ultra marathon, because I just wanted to see what I could do. It wasn't until later that things like time goals, which really, like they can be motivating and they are motivating, but again, it doesn't capture the full, for me, it didn't capture the fullness of myself as a runner or how I've grown as a runner. So it is hard. It truly is hard to relinquish that control, particularly when you have the experience of having done the races, right? Like, you have the experience. And that was kind of, for me, I self-coached with my books and Google for a very long time, and then I had a really bad experience at a marathon. Like, it was not fun, and after that I decided I never want to feel that way again. So it wasn't even about the time. It wasn't like, had nothing to do with the time. It was just like, I never want to feel that way again. I'm going to hire a coach. Like, I'm going to hire someone so then I don't have to think about it. Like, I can go and I can do the work. At that point, it was very much so like, I just want someone to give me my training plan, like, and then like do the work. But as that relationship has evolved, because I've let go of the reins, I've been able to see, like, okay, this person is also just a huge support person. And I will admit it here that, like, part of the reason why I was excited to sign up for London was because my coach was so excited about it. And it was one of those things where I'm like, wait, if she's excited about it and she's been with me this long, like, she knows what I can do. So I need to start being excited about it too. Like, there's something about taking the coach's excitement, and I think it goes back to like that trust of like trusting in you and knowing that you have my goal in mind. But I also feel like sometimes as a coach, I feel like sometimes the real goal before the athlete figures out what the actual goal is. And I don't know if
100%.
that's your experience.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I'm like, I think about it and I'm like, after I did a Chicago marathon last year and I was like, I'm never doing this again. No, this is, I don't like marathoning. It's awful. And then this year I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to go do it again. And my coach was so excited for me. And I'm like, there's something there. Like, there's something there. And she was excited for the fact that I would be doing a training cycle at a different time of year. Like that was like one of the things. And again, that's why I'm like, oh, I think she knew something that maybe I didn't know. And even then the messaging has been real heavy this month of like, just take it easy. Like if you want to, like, here are your runs, but on the days that you don't have runs, like go do a yoga class or go for a walk or go do something else, because I want you to really fall in love with running so that when marathon training starts and it gets hard, you can look back on this time of easiness and remember. And I think that's part of it too. Again, like that global view of knowing that your athlete is more than one training cycle.
Exactly. Yes.
You're like,
I would say that, and the athletes that I love too is just like, because like you'll get athletes that are like, I just want to use you for this one race, and that's great. But I love the athletes that I've had for like over a year, where it's like you've developed this relationship, you get to see them through all the seasons of running, and I love that because it's like you get to see them, their highest highs, their lowest lows, and you get to just build this great relationship with them. And to your point, like you get so excited for them when they've reached those highs, because it's like we've been working together for so long, and then to just see you reach that full potential is like the best feeling.
yeah. What do you think is an ideal time for that coaching relationship? Because I know, I'm sure a lot of people come to you when there's like a big race. And this is something that I've been thinking about for myself too, where it's like, okay, I understand if you're training for, let's assume it's like London in my case, right? And training officially starts in January. So a lot of people are probably going to find a coach for that January through April segment. Whereas I feel like some people would benefit, or a lot of people, or maybe everyone would benefit from like maybe 3-4 months before the training cycle actually starts. So what's your ideal length of time working with an athlete?
Well, I want it to be forever, obviously, but
Yeah.
I'd say like that relationship when it gets extra special with an athlete is once they come back for that second race. So I'd say, because you get to see them, you get to do a base with them for their first race, you get to train with them, then you get to do a recovery, and then you're building them back up again. So I feel like it's 2 races. That's when it's like that sweet spot. And like you guys have really developed that relationship, because obviously they trust you to come back, and then putting their trust back in you again. And I just like, you really start to now learn that runner better because you've worked with them already and you're progressing towards that next goal. And then obviously like it just keeps building from there. Not that you can I have a great relationships with those athletes too, that, are just training for that race, but I feel like it doesn't build as much until you do that second race.
Yeah. And I think you get a lot of information from athletes when they have different racing experiences, because I think when you're in training, and not to diminish training, because training is so important, but it's like it doesn't have the same pressures as a racing environment, racing situation. So like if you have a bad training run, okay, you're going to have if you have a bad 20 miler during a marathon training build, you're going to have another 20 miler maybe at some point where you can kind of rework that. Whereas if you have a bad race day, you're kind of there. So I feel like even as a coach, you get a lot of information from your athlete when they have different racing experiences, so that like, okay, how does this athlete perform physically and mentally when things are going well? How does the athlete perform when things are not going well? And then how does the athlete recover from all of that? And that's all just, again, going into like this relationship and how it's a live, living, breathing thing that really does, from what you're saying, like it benefits from at least like getting through 2 training cycles. So you do have a lot of athletes that just come on for 1 training cycle and then they're done? Or do they usually get to the point where they're like, this is definitely a necessity in my life?
I have a lot where it's the second part, like when we've developed a relationship and they're in there for the long run, as I like to say. But like you said, when those big races come, like Chicago, Boston, you'll definitely get those athletes that like, I just want to use you for this training cycle. And that's fine too. Like that's the point of a coach, right? To get you through the big race. So
yeah. How would you say you have evolved as a running coach? We've gone from being someone who is comfortable with longer distances to now coaching people in shorter distances. When you think of that evolution, what does that look like for you? And how do you anticipate that looking in the future as you continue to coach?
Yeah. So like I said, I feel like my skill set and knowledge has grown. I feel like I've done a lot of reading and education to kind of like get myself more well-rounded. I also, as you said, like a phase of life, I've done a lot of reading and research on pregnancy running, because that's where I am right now in life. So I have this idea in mind that maybe once the baby comes, that maybe I would want to go back and get certified in something to help women in prenatal running and postpartum running. I obviously haven't gotten to the postpartum yet because it's my first. So let me get through there first. But I follow some runners that are certified in that. I think that'd be a really fun area to get into because I've enjoyed pregnancy running so much and educating myself along the way. So I see myself evolving maybe into that platform, being like a really good resource for women that are pregnant or coming off of pregnancy, or just like how to, I don't know, be active, just gain movement in during pregnancy. So I see that maybe being where I build upon next while still doing my normal coaching.
Yeah. And that's something that's so beautiful because there isn't much dialogue on that, right? Like
No.
our dialogue right now is, well, I feel like for the longest time it was, and I'm sure you've gotten this at some point because there's still that old school mentality of like, you're doing too much. Like, think about the baby, you need to stop, right? And
The
then
baby's going to fall out. It's like, what?
have you actually gotten that?
Yes.
I love that I love that people say stuff like that, but I also love that people, and this is just awe, but also sarcasm, that people feel comfortable enough to even say that, right? Or they're
Oh
like,
my God. Well, I think
here's
a
my
lot of the time
opinion.
it's the people hiding behind the computer screen sometimes that leave comments, but I agree with you though. It's like definitely a realm that I think is getting tapped into a little bit more now, but I feel like it needs to be tapped into more because it's not just like people running saying like, oh, I feel great during this pregnancy. There's tons of studies done. There's like the American Pregnancy Association, like they back it now. So I truly believe like that's why my pregnancy, knock on wood, has been like so great so far. So I would love to be like an asset to other females that are pregnant for the first time or runners that have never run before through a pregnancy. So I think that's definitely something I want to dabble into.
Oh, absolutely. Again, for me, it's like there isn't enough conversation about that, or even just, how you get back into running postpartum, how you deal with, being pregnant and going into pregnancy as a runner, but maybe it stops feeling good halfway through the pregnancy and restarting that running relationship after an extended break. Like it's almost like that injury mentality of, okay, I can't do this, but I really want to get back to it. But how do I get back to it? How do I deal with the loss of fitness, quote unquote, loss of fitness because of pregnancy, because of birth? And I just would love to hear your thoughts on that. Like when you go down that road, or if you have any thoughts on that right now, because you've made it pretty far along in your own pregnancy and you're still very active and you're still moving around. And how has that experience been for you?
Yeah, so I distinctly remember I was on another podcast giving an interview and something like, what are your running goals for this year? In the back of my mind, I was really struggling with, because running to me is my identity. Like it's where I feel the most confidence, where I feel the most strong. It's a major aspect of my life. And like anyone who knows me, like my non-runner friends, like they know it's very important to me. So when people were asking like this time last year, like, what are your goals for 2022? In the back of my mind, I was really struggling because I was like, I want to be a mom. I know this is the time now. My husband and I are ready. But at the same time, I was like, oh my God, like I'm not going to be able to run. I'm not going to be able to race. It was really a struggle with me because it was like, you're kind of like switching your identity a little bit. But then I realized like running is always going to be there. And that's why I always tell people who ask me questions, if they message me on Instagram or something like that, like it's always going to be there. It's never going to leave you. It's not like the sport of running is going to suddenly end. So that is the first thing I would tell women is running will always be there. And then the second thing is it's different for every woman, like every person, it's going to be different. Every pregnancy journey is different. I'm running now at 39 weeks, but for the first 12 weeks, I wasn't allowed to do anything. I was put on pelvic rest because I was having some bleeding in the
Wow.
beginning and they just like couldn't figure out why. So I essentially couldn't do anything. I wasn't even allowed to really go on like a long walks. That was really a struggle. So I'm thinking like, all right, I'm pregnant now. Your hormones are all over the place. I'm emotional and I can't use my one outlet that I've relied on for how many years now. So that was a struggle. But then once my OB gave me like the green light, like everything's good to go, then I was able to start easing into running. It was kind of like what you just said earlier, like you go from like not running for 12 weeks. So as a runner, you know, like, okay, I shouldn't go into this gun ho. So I had to like really see myself almost, as you said, like an injured runner, like you're starting from square one again. So like I started with walking, then I started with run walk intervals. And then towards like the end of the second trimester, I was like, okay, I can like run like a normal runner now again. So it felt really good. And then same thing, once I got to the end of the third trimester, it's like your body is significantly different now. You need to modify again. So now it's like kind of going back down where you're like, okay, like I need to ease back on things. Maybe I'm not running as long. Maybe pace is different. But it's been an amazing journey. I truly feel that like any kind of movement, doesn't have to be running, helps with pregnancy.
Yeah. And I love that because it speaks to something greater, right? Of having to approach running with flexibility as it moves with life's changes. And here and I totally appreciate what you said of like running is always going to be there. Like the sport isn't going anywhere. It's not going to die. We're not going to wake up one morning and running is going to be gone. But we get so caught up in like the nowness of running that it's hard. And I feel like it's almost our instant gratification with running. It's like, we want to go out there. We want to run today. We want to see the PR. We want to do this. We want to like all of this. And there's a season for it all. I try to tell people, I mean, if it's been one of my sayings the past few months of like, if it doesn't add to your life, you need to subtract it from your life.
I
And I
love
think
that.
that, yeah. And even like with running, that is such a huge part of your identity. It's such a big part of my identity as well. I have to constantly ask myself, like, okay, is this bringing me joy? Am I having fun with this? Because there's enough in life that does not bring me joy that I don't have fun with that I have to do. Whereas running is something I'm choosing to do. So it's kind of that like reframing it for myself as well. And I just appreciate that reminder of, okay, like you've got to be flexible with it to meet you where you're at. And it's beautiful to see how you're applying that to yourself just as you apply it to your athletes. I mean, that's something you said earlier where it's like, okay, let's figure out like what's going on with life. And is your lifestyle in alignment with this particular goal and the amount of work that goes into making that goal a reality? So I can't wait to see that postpartum phase for you, because I think not only are you going to learn a lot, but I have a very clear feeling that you are going to share a lot of what you learn and that it is going to create this other passion for you, because there are a lot of women who would like to get into running, but maybe think that they've passed their time. And it's like,
Definitely.
no, you haven't. Like, you can start. And hey, there's coaches like you right here that are like, come on, I'm waiting for you. I'm eagerly waiting for you. And I think it's also going to be such a great time of learning for you when you're like, okay, so I'm not running. What does my body need? Because I think, and this is me personally, where I'm like, oh, I can teach others when I've actually lived through it. Like when I know, like I'm telling you this, not only because it's the research, because it's backed by science, because I've experienced it myself. So I'm so curious to follow along this journey of yours and to see how you normalize the experience of getting back into running after giving birth, because it's also our culture of the snap back and get back into it. And it works for some people, but I would say for the majority of people, it doesn't. And
Yeah.
if you're, yeah, and if you're looking to be a runner for the next 15, 20, 30 years of your life, listen, 6, 12 months, however long, like a year is just a drop in the bucket of your lifetime as a runner.
No, I agree. And it's funny because I've had these conversations with my husband who he didn't like realize right away. He's like, are you going to be like that mom that's like running the day after pregnancy? I'm like, well, number one, you can't do that. It's not good for you. You could really hurt your pelvis. But I was like, no, like my goal is I'm like making this vow to myself is I am not going to rush back. I'm going to like take the time with our new baby and then like make sure I am healthy. And right now, like the only thing I have for next year is Chicago on the docket. So like I just am giving myself enough time. And like that's one promise I'm making to myself because it's going to be a major life change. So like I don't need to be taking on major life change and then also trying to fit in running because I just see that leading to